Using colored pencils on bisque fired clay is such an affordable and vibrant way to have a lot of control over what your clay looks like after it's been in the kiln. Glazing's okay, but it's expensive, unpredictable, and I love any technique that we can do quickly and that is not expensive. This is really great for having total control over your color scheme, and if you already know how to use colored pencils, this is so much easier than trying to paint or trying to match colors with fickle glazes. If you love learning about art, hit that subscribe button so you never miss a weekly tutorial. I have a broken piece of bisque ware that has been fired in the kiln, and I'm going to show you how to fix it using simple Elmer's glue. You could use super glue or E6000, but Elmer's glue works really well. It's very affordable, and it's such a thin glue that it really gets in the cracks and crevices without creating extra spaces in your clay. I'm putting a thin line of glue in one of the broken pieces. I'm going to squish the two pieces together, then I'm going to let it dry and I'll flip it over and do the other side. Once it's pushed together, then I'll also put a layer of glue on the top surface and kind of use my finger, or you can use a paintbrush, to push it down into the crack so that it fuses it together, and when I paint it, there's not so much of a visible line. I'm also going to experiment with another type of glue to see if that will cover it up as well. About 20 minutes later, when the glue has dried and set, I'm going to flip it over and I'm going to fill in the other crack on the other side. I use my finger because the paintbrush is just too far away, and this should seal it together. I've done this before with a broken tile, and it's almost impossible to break it in half once the glue sets. I used some paper towels to kind of prop it up so that it would dry flat, since my front part of the surface is three-dimensional. I'm going to use this Liquid Nails clear seal because I'm going to paint this and I don't want that crack to be visible. And so I'm going to try using that, letting it dry, and just experiment to see what works better. I've never used this product before on clay, but I've used a ton of Elmer's glue, and I just want to see if it really does seal it so that you can't tell that there is a fracture. You could also use joint compound or any number of glues, but this is what I had on hand, so I'm going to try it out. Liquid Nails takes 24 hours to dry and set, so much longer than the Elmer's glue. So be patient. I tried it with the hairdryer, but it was still tacky, so I'm going to wait until the next day, and then I'm going to paint my tile one solid color using black acrylic paint. You need a small brush and a larger brush to cover your surface, and I'm painting over the fracture right away, and I'm very pleased with how it's covering up in a very similar texture to the bisque clay. I love any non-traditional surface treatment of clay. Sometimes I think glazing can be very stressful, expensive, and unpredictable. So I'm all about figuring out solutions of how I can have more control over my clay surface. I'm using black as a base color just because I want that kind of dark effect, and I want it to really enhance my shadows, my textures, and my receding areas in my clay. But you could paint it red, electric blue, silver, whatever acrylic paint color you have on hand. Sure to rotate your clay as you're painting to get in all the cracks, crevices, and edges of your clay. Sometimes you can't tell you missed a spot until you rotate your piece. The key here is you need to let your acrylic paint dry completely. Do not rush this process. I did, and I'll show you the dull result because of it. Ideally, if you're doing this at school, you should paint it in one class period, and then the next day add color, unless you have a block schedule and you have like an hour to let it dry. See that dull area of red and orange? That's my fail. That was about 20 minutes after I painted, and the paint was not completely dry, and you'll see the difference right away. I'm going to be using a variety of colored pencil brands, and I really love this technique because colored pencils can be really expensive or very affordable depending on your budget. So I'm using Blick Art Materials, I'm using good old-fashioned Crayola, and I'm going to sneak in a few Prismacolors along the way. See how much more vibrant that blue looks with the paint being completely dry? And gluing and painting, patience pays off. So I'm going to just start by doing a solid color, and as far as color scheme, I really don't have anything in mind. This is a technique that I've seen on the internet on various art teacher blogs and on Pinterest, but it's not something I've tried myself. So I'm just going to kind of blend in a lighter blue in this area just to see how it looks. I love how that enhances it. I'm a big fan of using colored pencils. You might notice a lot of my videos and tutorials are all about blending colored pencils. So if you're interested in that, check out my description box for some of my favorites if you're a beginner. But the key is never stick to one color. Always include 3 colors in an area, even if you still just use, for example, the color blue. Use a dark blue, a light blue, white, silver, something to really make it look 3D. Because this is my first time attempting this, I'm just playing around with any old color that grabs my attention, and because this is an abstract work of art, I don't have to really think too hard about what colors I'm choosing. Whereas if you're doing something a little more realistic or where your colors matter a little bit more, you might test them out on the back, maybe paint on the back black as well and do swatches. I really love how this pink is enhancing this three-dimensional coil that I added. And like I said, I'm never gonna stop with just one color. I'm gonna blend in a red to really get it a dynamic shadow, and then I'll overlap with a lighter color too. 3 is always my bare minimum. So if you're doing a color, don't just stop there. Blend like colors in the same color scheme, or mix things up and flash in a color that's unexpected. The white is okay, it's not standing out quite as much as I want it to, but it's still good for making a lighter area and for blending. I have a silver in here that I think I'll use last to kind of create a highlight, and I think I'll be happier with those results. So I'm just overlapping with the pink to kind of blend that in. The beauty and the secret to colored pencils is blend, blend, blend. Let's speed things up to double time. This video's footage is about 90 minutes, and you do not need to watch 90 minutes of me blending color. I'm gonna use the exact same colors I did with a very similar shape. So I'm just gonna speed things along a little bit since you've seen me do it before. If it looks like I'm coloring like crazy, yeah, it's twice the speed. And you see that orange I'm using? Orange and pink blend so beautifully together. I found a really nice teal color that I'm going to use by pressing the colored pencil against the edge to create a kind of pop of a color that matches the color scheme but stands out from that first blue that I used. So this is a really nice way to enhance your colors, and go back to sections to add more as you kind of get more familiar with the colors that you have on hand. Just like when you were painting, make sure to pick it up and look at it from all angles. The beauty of painting at first is that letting some of the black show will enhance all of your areas, but you don't want to just think surface, you want to really look around in a more three-dimensional view. I'm going to repeat the same color family that I did before, my blues, my teals, and I'm going to do that in that largest shape over here. Again, this is double time since you're more comfortable. You've seen me do this before. I'm going to fill this big old shape in with that first blue that I used. Can you believe how fast I am blending those colors? Almost like it's a time lapse. I wanted to fill this little area of negative space with a color that would contrast, so I thought let's do orange, the perfect complement since blue and orange are complementary colors. I'm going to blend a little bit of yellow in there, and you can already see it's much more vibrant than the first example of the orange and yellow that I did. Let's go ahead and do this other coil pink, zipping along with another time lapse since this is just the same repeated color scheme on a very similar shape. For the background area or the flat part of the tile, I'm going to try some neutral colors. I have students that may be using this technique for some clay portraits that we made, and I want to see how the black paint underneath reacts with like the browns, the tans, and the more like skin tone colors that are used, just, you know, in case this technique would work for that. I do like how this works. It matches that pink kind of warm color scheme but keeps it neutral, and I like filling in this big area. We'll see what the verdict is on whether or not this would be suitable for creating skin tone for portraits. I'm going to speed things up to double time, not quite time lapse, as I repeat this brown and this yellow over this large area in the background. Debating what to do as I'm coloring this large area with the brown about that first area that I went over. If you don't like your colors, blending with and covering up with colored pencils is easy to do. And another option is repaint it. So I could kind of paint over that area, let it dry completely this time, and come back at it using the same colors or maybe colors that I prefer. And keep in mind that all brands of colored pencils are not the same. So if yours are more expensive, there's lots of reasons and factors why that is. They might have a softer, less waxy consistency. They might have a higher level of pigment and less filler. So you do kind of pay for what you get, but these Blick colored pencils that I'm using, I got a class set of, and I'm really happy with them, and the Crayolas. You don't have to just use expensive Prismacolors to create beautiful works of art, but you do kind of get what you pay for, so keep that in mind with the vibrancy and the blendability of your colored pencils. I have not tried the color green yet, so I'm going to see what that looks like against the black, and right away I'm happy with what I see. I'm going to mix a little bit of yellow, a little bit of teal to really push that green into the area that I want it to be. Remember, never just use one color. I always do a bare minimum of 3, a dark, a medium, and a light version of that color, and then sometimes a color that is completely different, like try mixing like orange and green, for example, and then a dark color to create a shadow. Let's time lapse this since I'm repeating that same green color combination in multiple areas of my work of art. I finally found that silver that I was talking about, and I love a metallic neutral. It looks really good on three-dimensional objects. So you can see how it just pushes that area, it makes it sparkle, and it really creates a nice shadow where the silver isn't, where that black really has a chance to shine. I'm a little scared to use red, I guess because it didn't work out so beautifully the first time, but you can see here the red looks really nice against that green and right up to the blue. And I'm going to use the red to kind of fill in this section here. Colored pencils really works well on clay because you can create big, large areas of color, but you can also really get in those cracks and crevices that other tools that are in a paintbrush sometimes struggle with. Here I go blending a little bit of yellow just to enhance my color, to blend it, and to give it that nice light effect. Yellow and red are such a natural color combination. They're both so warm, and then when you blend it together, it also creates a really beautiful red-orange. At this point of the process, I'm really comfortable with my colors, the blending, and I'm going to try and let loose and have a little bit of fun, blending in some colors together that I might not originally think would go. So you can see here, let me zoom in for you, that it is kind of difficult to go over that liquid nails. It definitely is a different texture than the rest of the area, and the colors appear a little bit darker. Luckily, that's a receding or carved area, so it just looks like I did it on purpose. But keep in mind the liquid nails definitely was a different texture when you color over it. So as far as color scheme or color organization, I'm just throwing caution to the wind and blending my reds into my blues and my oranges into my greens, and whatever area of color meets another area, I'm totally fine with it. I think having those raised areas of pink and blue really make those areas pop, and then the background I can be a little looser with how my colors blend together. Again, you might notice I love color blending. I'm not scared to blend unlike colors together. And so really experiment and see what you can do, not keeping things basic and just using one color in one section. One thing I would like to play with is having my students paint their background a different solid color than just black. I think the only color I probably wouldn't use is white. I've had bad experiences of using colored pencils over white acrylic paint before. But like, what if we did brown and then we mixed a variety of skin tones? What if you did like a fire engine red and then you use cool colors on top of it, or vice versa? So think contrast. If you want to use a color scheme of warm colors, use a darker color or a cooler color to kind of contrast and pop against it. If all else fails, on the back of your work of art, you could divide it into 4 and try out 4 different colors that you like, test out the colors on the back and see which ones work for you, or go at it like me and just color any old way you wish, overlapping if there's areas that don't quite meet your standards. Instead of using white, I'm using silver to highlight my 3D areas. Because this is a ceramic relief tile, I have these really interesting areas that are raised up and three-dimensional, and then I have these carved and subtractive areas. So this silver can really give the 3D effect even more of a push. It gives it kind of a nice shine, and I just love how the silver looks next to the black paint. And I feel like metallic is kind of a universal neutral, and so it really connects and it matches any color scheme that you use. I'm a big fan of this silver Prismacolor pencil. I like getting right on the edge of these raised shapes, and you can see how it just gives it a highlight, really makes it look three-dimensional. So I'm going to try and do this to each raised shape to really separate it from the background or the carved or subtracted areas. That being said, just like before, I'm going to speed things up a little bit so that the video isn't 2 hours long. And again, you don't need to watch me do every single step, because when you get your own clay in front of you, you'll have your own ideas and your own handling of the materials. Just keep in mind, everything needs to be completely dry before you start adding your colored pencils. Each brand of colored pencil is slightly different. And if you really want to create a dynamic color scheme, don't be afraid to blend using at least 3 colors per section and to really think outside the box of your color combinations. As an artist, I like how the black background color really kind of tones down my color scheme. As a teacher, a lot of times students, their colors get a little bit crazy, a little bit wild and bright. And although I love bright color schemes, sometimes it's a good thing to kind of tone things down a little bit and to create color harmony. So I think I'm pretty much done. I love this non-traditional technique, no glaze needed, and it's such a great way to have more control over your color scheme with a finished bisque-fired piece of clay. Thank you so much for sticking around and making art with me. And if you're interested in more non-glazing tutorials, check these out. Find me on Instagram at thatartteacher_Machado to see what my students are up to in my classroom, and find my website, thatartteacher.com, for all of my free, full-length lesson plans, rubrics, and student examples.